Hi guys, this is Mr. Hollins, and at this point, now that you're in high school, you're going to be responsible for calculating your own grade. The question should not come, Mr. Hollins, what's my grade? You should be able to calculate. Now that you have the record on Infinite Campus, you can see the total points possible. And that's really what we're talking about, is the total points that give you your grade and the percentages that you've earned. So you have to understand percentages, what the numbers mean, and how to calculate them. So what we will tell you is, you already know, usually you think of 100% as 100 points. And this sometimes is how it works out. So if you have 100 points and that equals 100%, well then that's easy to calculate, because if you get a 90, that's still an A. So from 100 to a 90, that's an A. From 90, or from 89 down to 80, 89 to 80, that's a B, and so forth. But this isn't always the case with your scores. Your grade will be determined and it will accumulate points, at which point then you have maybe 514 points that establish what your grade for the class may be. Let's take the example of a paycheck. For example, if your paycheck is $420, that equals 100%. That's 100% of your paycheck. Okay? So what we have to figure out now is the scale, the percentage scale, and that would be 10%. It would decrease by 10%, and we'll show you some other percentages, but let's start with that, because that's usually how a grade scale works. If a test was worth 420 points, paycheck's $420, it doesn't matter. You can still calculate these percentages. So what we have to do first is find 10%. To find 10%, all we need to do is take this decimal and move it over to just one place. And so by moving that, we come up with, instead of 420, now we have 42. So what we will do is take 42 and subtract that from the 100%, which is 420. So 420 minus 42 gives us 378. Okay, and so that's 10%, down 10% of 420 is 378. So if someone says, we're taking 10% of your pay of 420, you would get $378. Let's subtract another 42, another 10%, and that would equal 336. Subtract another 42. See, each time it's 10%, which is 42 in this case. So we subtract that, and then we would get 294. Subtract another 42, and we get 252. So if this were a grading scale, you could now see that 420 minus 42, this would be your A range, this would be the B range, this would be the C range, and this would be the D range. And anything below that would be unsatisfactory for you. And if we take a look, half of 420 is 210. 400 divided by 2, and that's 210, and that's 50%. So 50% certainly wouldn't be failing. And if you were expecting $420 on a paycheck and you got $210, would you be satisfied? Okay, we've already said that 10% of 420 would be 42. That's easy. We just moved the decimal over. Well, what if we wanted 5%? Well, 5% would just be half of 10%. So 5% of 420 would be 21. Well, what if we wanted 15%? This would be, let's mark these, 10%. This would be 5%. And so if we just take 42 and 21, add those together, we would get a 15%. So 3 and 6. So 63 would be 15%. And if you're able to do this, you're able to leave a tip for a restaurant. So just calculating 10, 5, or 15%, it's easy. Just move the decimal over and add as many different percentages of these as you like. It doesn't matter what the number is. You can always find the 10%. Let's take the example where you may be working with decimals. Let's take 514. 514 at some point will probably be your grade to establish this in class. And so what we will show you is that to get to 10%, we just move this decimal over, and so our 10% becomes 51.4. And so if 514 is 100% and 51.4 is 10%, let's subtract that from the total possible. And 51.4 taken away from 514 leaves up with 462.6. Again, subtracting 51.4, this gives us 411.2. Subtract 51.4, and this gives us 359.8. Again, subtracting one more time, 51.4, that equals 308.4. And as we saw in the last example, if we take 514 and divide it by 2, 514 divided by 2, that equals 257. And if this is where your points are, that's certainly unacceptable if indeed 514 would give you an A for a grade. So here's your A range. This would be B, this is C, and this is D. And finally, if we take a look at the percentages for your grade, for example, let's say we have 687 total points, and you wish to find out what your grade is, and let's just say that you've earned 602 points, so you've got 602 out of 687. What we do there is take 602, divide that by 687, and that gives us 0.8762736536. Now, can you use all of those numbers? No. What's going to happen now is we multiply this entire number times 100, which is what percent means. Percent means per 100. And so we multiply that, and your grade would be 87.6. The next two here would determine whether that gets rounded up to a 7, but it does not because it is not 5 or greater. And so your percentage would be 87.6%. That would be your grade. Indeed, if you got 602 points of 687 possible points. And that's how you determine your grade.